The impeachment proceedings are up to the House. They're going to have to make that decision.
If any other human being in this country had done what's documented in the Mueller report, they would be arrested and put in jail.
If for the next year, year and a half, going right into the heart of the election, all that the Congress is talking about is impeaching Trump and Trump and Mueller, and we're not talking about health care. We're not talking about raising the minimum wage to a living wage. What I worry about is that works to Trump's advantage.
I think we have very good reason to believe that there is an investigation that has been conducted which has produced evidence that tells us that this president and his administration engaged in obstruction of justice. I believe Congress should take the steps towards impeachment.
I think he's made it pretty clear that he deserves impeachment. I'll leave it to the... But I'm also going to leave it to the House and Senate to figure that out.
Those were 5 2020 Democratic candidates sharing their thoughts on the idea of impeaching President Trump. The candidates were part of a town hall marathon on CNN Monday night. The 4 senators and 1 mayor were asked about a wide range of topics over the span of an hour. Think speed dating, but for politics. Joining me now with more are Washington Post reporter Sean Sullivan and CBS News political reporter Ed O'Keefe. Sean and Ed, thanks so much for being with us. Sean, let me start with you, and let's start with impeachment. None of those 5 candidates are in the House of Representatives, so they have no say on the first part of impeachment proceedings. Talk to us about the strategy of calling for impeachment versus leaving it up to the House.
Well, there is a segment of the Democratic Party right now that is very, very angry with what they have learned in the Mueller report, and they want to see Congress take action, and they want to see this Democratic House, this new Democratic House majority, take action. So for some of these presidential candidates, they are recognizing that. They're also recognizing that, a lot of these Democrats are people who might vote and very likely will vote in the Democratic primary and are looking around at these different candidates. And so you're seeing some of the Democratic presidential candidates key their responses to that. But given the realities of what's going on in the House right now, given the split we've seen, and given that many House Democrats do not favor impeachment, it does present a division in the party. And you hear from some presidential candidates who actually agree with House leadership, who actually want to focus more on the economic issues, what Democrats have called the kitchen table issues in 2020 politically, and not focus on impeachment, not focus on the Mueller investigation. They believe there is actually an incentive to talk about the issues, these pocketbook issues that they've been bringing up, and not talk about this investigation. So we are seeing a real divide, but you can understand why some of these Democratic candidates are calling for impeachment right now, even though the House and House leadership is not really taking that approach.
So, Ed, what do you think? Is it too easy to be a Democrat running for president in 2020 and just say, oh, I'm not in the House, let the House decide?
No, I mean, as Sean laid out there's very clear positions you could take on this. You're either for it or you take the sort of wait and see approach. And I think what part of what they're struggling with is there's a segment of people who are paying attention this early on that want an answer. They want a yes or no answer. And for those that are saying impeach the guy, let's remember one other thing. They come from states where, opposition to a Republican president, no matter who it is baked in anyway, and that they're bound to be yes for impeachment votes in a Senate trial were there to be one. So it's no surprise that Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris from Vermont, Massachusetts, and California would take this position. It probably would be newsier if they didn't. And Sanders even goes further and expresses some concern and some caution, saying that the party has to be careful about jumping down this rabbit hole and not focusing on other issues that won them control of the House last November, won them state houses across the country, and very well could win them the White House next year. So, right. I think Klobuchar's position, which is I'm not a member of the House, I'm a member of the jury and the Senate, therefore I'm reserving judgment, is probably a more practical and smart one from a senator's perspective, but might not help her at all when it comes to the politics at a time when the party is increasingly liberal, younger, and fervently anti-Trump.
All right, so the candidates also had a chance to sell some of their policy ideas. Here's some of what they pitched. Let's listen.
If we put that 2-cent wealth tax in place on the 75,000 largest fortunes in this country, 2 cents, We can do universal childcare for every baby 0 to 5, universal pre-K, universal college, and knock back the student loan debt burden for 95% of our students and still have nearly $1 trillion left over.
So I believe that people who commit crimes, they pay the price. When they get out of jail, I believe they certainly should have the right to vote. But I do believe that even if they are in jail, they're paying their price to society, but that should not take away their inherent American right to participate in our democracy.
Upon being elected, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to get their act together and have the courage to pass reasonable gun safety laws. And if they fail to do it, then I will take executive action.
So, Ed, some real policy ideas. Could any of these ideas actually become policies implemented in the White House?
Not if there's a Republican Congress or even just a Republican Senate. A few things there. A 2-cent tax on billionaires, trillionaires, whatever, okay, that generates a lot of money, but that's a tax increase that even some Democrats would be concerned about. Allowing prisoners to vote from behind bars, not only a wildly out of left field idea, but how exactly would that be implemented? And I don't think that's a debate that most Democrats want to have either. And on the executive action taken on gun safety, look, the Obama administration looked into that after the Sandy Hook shooting in Connecticut and couldn't come up with many things that the executive branch could do, that the president could do alone through executive action. Even President Trump realized that the bump stock ban was basically all he could do and compelled the ATF to make that change. But there's not much else, depending on the legal interpretation, that a president could do on their own, given that there's the Second Amendment and given that there's a lot of laws out there or policies that would have to be implemented through law. So these are great, interesting, debatable ideas, and certainly we as journalists love to pick them apart and we should discuss them more often. But the reality is if Washington is in a divided state, it won't happen. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell went so far yesterday as to say, as long as I'm running the Senate, this won't happen. I will be the rain on their parade.
Right. Now, in addition to the policy ideas, these town halls also gave the candidates a chance to show off their personalities. We all know how important that is in politics, so let's check it out.
All right, how about our first question? We ready?
Why not?
Why not, indeed?
What else do we have to do?
That's it.
I came out because I wanted to date. And if dating had been available to me in my 20s, I'm not sure I would have got nearly as much done.
We need to speak many truths, and one of them is this. The vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And I know that to be true. I know it to be true because I've been exposed to many cultures. Right? You got me. Right, there you go. So I know it to be true.
And every single time I have run, I have won every single congressional district in my state, including Michelle Bachmann's, okay? It's when you guys are supposed to cheer, okay? All right, so I didn't do that.
So I jumped in the race, and sure enough, you know, the early coverage is about what I'm wearing. It's about my hair. It's about my voice. It's about whether or not I smile enough. I didn't.
So, Ed, we know personality is important, but just how important is that intangible factor when you hit the campaign trail?
Well, it matters increasingly in this day and age where viral moments have a way of sparking interest and, frankly, fundraising dollars for these candidates. And it is an element of the coverage that, whether we like it or not, does matter because it generates a lot of copy. It gets them mentioned on programs that are not necessarily news programs or on websites that don't necessarily cover politics 24/7. And that's where there are a lot of people that these candidates need to reach. So they can, you know, kind of turn their nose at it, but in reality, they need a lot of this, and it helps them reach people and audiences that they wouldn't otherwise. I think what's still most interesting is to watch an openly gay presidential candidate discuss their dating life and their decision to do that. That, to me, is the new thing when it comes to personality this cycle. Women running, we've had that. Not to discount it in any way, but to have somebody who is openly gay discuss that, campaign with his husband, post photos of him and his husband holding hands. I was with some family members over the weekend who marvel at the fact that that is happening,
Right.
and that the Democratic Party is okay with it. And this family member was okay with it, but they went on a great long rant about how interesting it is that it's happening. And it's true. I think that is new ground.
It
and
is.
It's part of why he's doing so well.
I think we all have gay friends. I have gay friends who tell me it's hard to underestimate how seismic this moment is.
Sure.
You know, just in American history and in American politics. But Ed, before we let you go, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan spoke in New Hampshire today saying he is seriously considering challenging President Trump for the Republican nomination. He would join former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld. But if Hogan runs, Ed, what is the chance that we could see all three on a debate stage?
Well, if that happens, let's sure hope our friends at CBS News and the accounting department pony up the money so we can host that debate. Because I think it would be a sight to see, but I don't think it's likely. Look, Hogan went farther than he has before. He talked about this with us in an interview in March. He's talked about it with Sean's colleagues at the Post and with others, that he is toying with the idea, and he's going to continue to toy with it, because at the least, he understands there's an element of the Republican Party, whether silent or vocal about it, that is concerned about the president, his temperament, what he's been up to. And I think there's grave concern among some Republicans that the president could blow it. That's Hogan's biggest concern. We'll see whether or not he actually gets in.
And Hogan is a more serious challenger to the president than Weld, wouldn't you say?
Because he's a sitting governor, yes, and he has a political operation and a proven ability to win and win big in a blue state, Maryland. He's only the second governor, Republican governor, since Reconstruction to get reelected. Second Republican governor since Reconstruction to get reelected. And when we talked, he was quite proud of that, mentioned it like 2 or 3 times, trying to point out that he has potential crossover appeal.
I remember your great interview with him. All right, Ed O'Keefe, we thank you so much. Sean, thank you for sticking around. You had an article from this weekend headlined, "For Bernie Sanders, 2016 Gets in the Way of 2020. So tell us about your reporting here.
Well, I've spent some time on the campaign trail watching Senator Sanders at some of these rallies, at some of these town hall events that he does, and one pattern that has come up over and over is the extent to which he talks about 2016. You know, he will compare that election to this one. He will point out that in the last 4 years, people have started to take his ideas more seriously, that when he ran back in 2016, a lot of the ideas that he's championing now and championed then were regarded as radical, and now they've become more mainstream, and many more Democrats have embraced them. So that's one element of it. Another element of it is the way in which he campaigns and sort of the posture he has with regards to the rest of the Democratic Party, or at least some Democrats who have not warmed up to him. Right now he has a really loyal base of support. People who really, really like Bernie Sanders, people who really liked him in 2016, who will go to his rallies, who will line up to see him. But the question is, can he expand that base? Can that base become bigger? Can he attract new Democrats to support him? And I think that's an open question right now. And when you look at some of the rhetoric he uses on the campaign trail, it looks like he is keying a lot of his speeches and a lot of his remarks to that loyal base, and not necessarily to broadening his reach in the Democratic Party. Now that said, in a crowded field where you have so many candidates, having a base can be really valuable. You could win some of these states potentially with 35% of the vote, and his advisors recognize that. So I think right now, they are putting an emphasis on making sure that he has a strong base of support. And when you look at that, that is very, very similar to 2016. So, it's sort of campaigning now under the shadow of 2016 with a lot of the same tactics he used back then.
But could this also be a strategy to focus on the short game and sort of clinch the nomination and then switch gears a little bit if he makes it?
It could be, but some Democrats wonder, some Democrats who are not Sanders supporters wonder what happens if and when this Democratic field starts to thin out, when candidates start dropping out of this race. Then what happens when you don't have 18 candidates but you have 2 or 3? Do voters start to rally against him? Do they start to line up with him? One thing that he's tried to underscore to voters everywhere he goes is that he is a candidate who can match up, who can go toe-to-toe with President Trump. And of course, this is something that some Democrats doubt, and a lot of Republicans are trying to stoke doubt about. They're saying, is somebody who identifies as a democratic socialist somebody who can take on Trump? So he's trying to convince voters right now that he is up to that task, and his campaign recognizes that's a central question that a lot of these voters have when they size up these candidates. Which of them is best capable of taking on Trump? He's trying to address concerns right now that exist in the party about his ability to do that.
Sean Sullivan, thank you. We really appreciate your insight.
Thanks so much.